All right, right now we're going to look at 2012 macro test question 2. Basically, this is a asset liability question. So they give you the required reserve, excess reserve, loans, demand deposit. On this one, do not worry about owner's equity. It really doesn't come into play. So when they ask you what is the reserve requirement, what you first look at is you look at the demand deposit. That is what they're required to keep in reserves. So you can see that's 100,000. The required reserve is 10,000, which means the required reserve is 10%. All right. Lewis withdrew 5,000 from his checking account, and the question is asking you by how much did the reserves change on Lewis's withdrawal, and basically it's withdrawal. So basically the answer to this is going to be 5,000 because he is withdrawing $5,000 from the account. And when it says reserves, they're just talking total and total reserves, which remember is required and excess. What is the initial effect on the withdrawal on M1, measure of money supply? The answer there would be nothing, because remember that the money's in the money supply, whether he has it in his hand or it's in the bank. M1, there's two things that really, if you look at this, that make up M1. M1 is cash, and it is anything in checkable deposits. You can see that we are taking one form of M1 and putting it in another form of M1. All right. As a result of withdrawal, what is the new value of excess reserves in the balance sheet? Now remember, if we take 5,000 out, we lose this right here, which means because assets have to equal liabilities, we're going to lose there then 5,000. So now we only have $95,000 in demand deposit, which means we no longer need 10,000. We only need 9,500. And what that means is the remaining 500 would be what is held in excess reserves. All right. Assume the next day John withdraws money from the account. Assuming there are no loans called in, how can they cover their reserves? Well, two things are going to happen. They're going to either borrow it from the Federal Reserve, so they're going to borrow money from the Federal Reserves, or another bank. Oops, sorry about that. Yep, that's the problem with technology nowadays. Or another bank. So basically you can see, number 2 question kind of focus on assets and liability. But once again, pretty straightforward, relatively easy problem. You don't have to calculate the multiplier. All right, we're going to now continue, and we're going to look at the second one here in 2012, question 3. Okay, assume the economy is in long-run equilibrium with full employment. Now, your key words there are full employment. So full employment is something that I would at least circle here, at least for my own knowledge. So it's going to ask me to draw it. So once again, full employment short run is asking you to draw aggregate demand, aggregate supply. They mention long run aggregate supply, so therefore you may need to include it because you have to show long run. So basically we're in long run. We put price level, GDP or output at the bottom, your aggregate demand line sloping down, aggregate supply line is sloping up, and once again you put long run aggregate supply, and we know we're at equilibrium. Always then make sure you draw your lines down, and you want to label one Y1 and P1. Okay, I'm sorry, it's kind of crushed, all together there. Assume that there's an increase in exports. On your graph, show the effect of higher exports. So let me get a different color here. I say to myself, well, exports, is that demand or supply? Remember, demand is CI, G, and X. So, okay, therefore, it's going to be a change in demand. So now I move my AD up. I put my AD curve here. I call it AD1. You can see now my equilibrium has gone up, and we know when demand goes up, takes everything with us, price level goes up, and GDP goes up. And it says what happens then. So all we have to do there is draw that graph and draw it on there. Then it says, based on your answer in part B, what is the impact of higher exports on real wages? Now, the key word there is real. Remember, as soon as you hear real, you think, oh, I got to take out inflation. So, therefore, if price level goes up and we have to take out inflation, real is going to go down. Because what's happening now is I didn't get an increase in salary. So for example, if I'm making $100, I'm still making $100, but now the prices go up. So maybe I could have bought 5 of something, but now I can only buy 4 of something. So my real wages is going to go down. And I like to think of that as how much really then can you buy? And I can't buy as much. All right. As a result of the exports, Anderson Land increases expenditure on new container ships and equipment. Okay, so I hear equipment especially, and you immediately have to think this is Big I, and we know Big I is investment. So basically what's going to happen is businesses are investing in the future. You remember C plus I plus G plus X, that I is investment. So what's going to happen is my aggregate demand curve is going to go up. All I would have to do there is draw an arrow or put up. And then it says, what is the impact on the long run aggregate supply? Well, remember, investment causes economic growth. Okay, when you have economic growth, you're then going to have an increase in long-run aggregate supply, which, remember, is also full employment. So that answers that question. All right, we're back to 2011, question 3. Once again, this is an assets and liability. Now, the first thing I just want to draw your attention to, even though it says owner's equity here, that's not going to mean anything. Typically, and basically what owner's equity is people give the owner money to start his bank, and so he then, like a stock, will pay them back, or like a bond. So based on the account, calculate the reserve ratio. Well, you always look at the demand deposit because that's what the Fed says you have to hold in case those people come back for their money. So basically, they have to hold 2,000. So your ratio would be 20%. Typically, they use the ratios as either 10% or 20%. Typically, the math is easy to do because you can't use the calculator. Suppose the Federal Reserve purchases 5,000 worth of bonds. So I see purchase 5,000 worth of bonds. So immediately I think, okay, buy bonds, and you wouldn't necessarily write this on the test, but you could, buy bonds, big bucks. So I know that this buying of bonds is going to increase the excess reserve. So what happens to your excess reserves? Immediately, the bank, it is going to go up $5,000. Remember, they put that money, by buying the bonds, they take the bond, they put the money in. That's new money to the economy. So the money supply already increased by 5,000 with the selling, when they bought that bond, or when the Fed sold the bond. So, and then your demand deposit here, nothing will change in your demand deposit, and they're not asking for any explanation here. The idea is your demand deposit will only change if there is a withdrawal or if there is a deposit. Okay, then it says calculate the maximum amount that the money supply will change. To do this, remember, you need the multiplier, and the multiplier is 1 over 0.20, which that equals 5. So remember, this 5,000 is all new money. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 5,000 times 5, and that equals 25,000. So we have an increase in 25,000. We're assuming two things. We're assuming that the bank's going to give loans and people are going to deposit money in the account. If one of those doesn't happen, then it won't multiply to its full potential. We're going to skip D because that's not something that I talked about yet, so we're going to skip that one. So here it basically says now, suppose instead of the purchase of a bond, an individual deposits 5,000 in cash in their checking account. What is the immediate effect of that? There is zero effect. Okay, the money supply does not change. Money supply does not change. Okay, because you remember that money that who was it? Was let's just give this guy a name, John. John deposited $5,000. It was already in the money supply. You're just putting in the checking account, which is also the money supply. Both are M1, so no money is increased until the bank makes that first loan. All right, we're back here with 2010 question 1. First, assume the United States is in currently long-run equilibrium, and that is important. Not in a recession, not in inflation. So when you draw that, you're going to put price level, you're going to put GDP, you're going to have aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and once again, you're going to have long-run aggregate supply. You need long-run aggregate supply because that's what shows you are at equilibrium. Okay, draw a correctly labeled graph and of demand supply, show each long run, and then you would make sure to show Y and P. You would just make your line there. I'm not going to do it because I'm trying to go a little quicker and there's not a lot of room here. Okay, assume that the government increases spending on national defense without raising taxes. On your graph, show how the government affects the aggregate demand. So let's change this to blue. We know government spending is demanding, so therefore AD is going up. So basically what happens is AD goes up. So you would put, show on your graph, so AD would increase. Now, notice they want to know unemployment rate. This graph does not show unemployment rate, but you know, all right, you know that GDP went up. And if GDP goes up, all right, that means unemployment is going to go down because more people are needed to produce the more goods. So there's an indirect relationship there. GDP goes up, more people have jobs, unemployment goes down. Assume the economy adjusts to a new equilibrium after the increase in government spending. Okay, assume the economy adjusts to a new equilibrium. All right, so we're going to assume that it goes to a new long-run equilibrium. How will the short-run supply curve in the new equilibrium compare with the initial? Okay, assume the economy okay, so the economy is going to adjust to a new long run. So remember, sorry, I had to think there, I had to read the question. So once again, with this new AS, we're in an inflation gap. So we know prices are going to go up. So they're saying here, the key to this part here is, A, you see a new long run equilibrium, okay, compared with that initial in the long run. So how will the short run? So basically what's happening, remember, price level is going up, okay? Price level makes wages go up, which then makes AS go to the left. And what happens when the AS goes to the left, you can see we're right back on equilibrium. That says on the graph, label the new long-run equilibrium as price level 2. So then you would just label that as price level 2. All right. In order to finance the government spending on national defense, the government borrows money from the public. All right, so now we're moving to the two graphs. Most of your number ones will have two graphs. So what we're doing here, we're going to draw the graph. Any graph that deals with money is going to deal with interest rate. And down here, it's the quantity of loanable funds. How much money is out there to loan? You have your supply line. You have your demand line. Remember, your supply line is really savings. Your demand line is how much people are demanding to borrow money. So let's change colors here. We can see basically that the government has to pay for this, so they're going to have to borrow money. So you can see basically the AD goes up. You can see the interest rate was here, now the interest rate's here. So you can basically see that the increase in demand drives up interest rate. When interest rate goes up, the next part of the question is asking, then what's going to happen to investment? We know interest rate goes up, businesses are going to borrow less, all right, and that means investment's going to go down. And we know the key to investment, that's what causes economic growth. So economic growth goes down, because businesses are not investing in the future. Investing in future. All right, sorry for the all the writing all over the place. Hopefully you can read it, but that would be enough to answer that question. Now, if we go to the question underneath this one, let's just move this up. All right, now we're looking at the demand for money. So a drop in the credit card fees, causes people to use more credit cards, and they demand less money. Now, what's nice about this is they already tell you here that it's demanding less money. So you're drawing the money market graph, money market, and money market is the total market for all the money. Demand for money, downward sloping because it's inverse to interest rates. You're more likely to borrow money at a lower rate and less likely to borrow at a higher rate. And then you have interest rates and you have quantity of money. Okay, so the graphs show how the nominal interest rate will be affected. Once again, we can put nominal interest rate there so you can see what we're saying is people will demand less money because now they can use their credit cards. So you don't need to have that cash on you. So your demand goes down. So you can see here was your first interest rate, here was your second interest rate. So you can see the interest rate went down. Given the interest rate, don't worry about the bond price. We didn't talk about that yet. Given the interest rate change, what will happen to the price level in the short run? Well, we know that, I'm just going to draw this down here. We know that since the interest rate is going down, and you can see this question over and over again, it's going to be on the AP, interest rate impacts investment, which then impacts AD, which then impacts price level. All right, they're not asking you to draw the graph, they're just asking you to explain it. So the connection between this graph and the AD graph is investment. And when interest rates are going down here, businesses are more likely to borrow money and more invest. The last part of this is identify an open market operation the Federal Reserve could use to keep nominal rates constant at the level that existed before the drop in credit. So basically, they want to get it to back up here. So they want to then get it back up here. Therefore, you think about it, they want the interest rate to go up because it's right here. So in order for it to go up, they're going to increase the money supply. So they're going to increase the money supply. And notice it says open market operation. Okay, so what are they going to do? They're going to sell bonds, big bucks. Oh no, my fault, sorry. Sell bonds, small bucks. So they are selling bonds, and that will then drive the interest rate up to where it was.